You've woken up, but why do you still feel this emptiness? Perhaps you have looked inward, meditated, been silent. Perhaps you felt your soul tremble, but still, something inside you whispers, "Is that all?" You thought that spiritual awakening would bring peace, but he encountered silence. And in that silence, an absence that hurts. The soul has been silent for too long. Listen, that's what Rumi said. But what is there to listen to, if everything seems to echo the same nothingness? Do you feel it? The feeling of having left the matrix, but not yet having found a home. The search for the sacred, which seems to have made you more sensitive, but also more lost. As if he had left behind everything that was illusory, but what is real has not yet appeared. It's like waking up from a dream and realizing you're alone in the dark room of your soul. The ego crumbled, the masks were ripped off. But now, what to do with this silence? You thought waking up was the end of the pain. But perhaps this is just the beginning of a more conscious pain. A pain that doesn't scream. It just weighs you down. It just silences you. It just observes you. The world no longer holds you captive, but the sky has not yet opened. You have freed yourself from many attachments. But why do you still feel trapped inside? Rumi said, "You are born twice. Once from the womb, once from the soul. The second time hurts more. And perhaps now you are experiencing this second pain. It's confusing, I know. You read, study, understand. But when you close your eyes, you can still feel the whole. A kind of cosmic absence. A silence that brings no answers. Only more questions. Have you truly awakened? Or is he simply in a new prison? A more subtle, more spiritual one, but still a prison? Perhaps this is the secret that no one tells you. Waking up isn't about crossing the finish line. It's like stepping through a portal into the unknown. And in this place, nothing is guaranteed. Nothing is solid. Nothing is safe. You are no longer sleeping. But he is not fully awake yet either. It's in that in-between place, in the spiritual limbo where few manage to remain without going insane. This is where the real work begins. This is where many people turn back. This is where the soul whispers, and almost no one listens. Do you feel it? The soul speaks in silence. She doesn't scream. She doesn't beg. She just waits. And perhaps you are so used to searching sense who still hasn't learned to simply to feel. You want answers. But waking up doesn't bring answers. He destroys the questions. And that is terrifying. But breathe. Because if you're at that point, in this emptiness, in this non-place, it means your soul is calling you to something greater. It's not the end. This is just the beginning of a new way of listening. And perhaps, just perhaps, the meaning you're searching for isn't outside of yourself, nor in the next book, nor the next video, nor the next guru. Perhaps meaning is now, at this very moment, trying to emerge from the silence you feel inside. But to hear it, you need to keep going, because the next key is still hidden. If this touched something inside you, don't ignore it. Write in the comments, "I listen to the silence of my soul." This simple gesture is not just engagement. It's a ritual. It's like making a pact with your deepest truth. It's saying to the universe, "I'm ready to feel even if it hurts." And if this video spoke to your soul, if something inside you awakened or trembled, then leave your like, not out of vanity, but because that's the way to get this content to other lost souls like yours. Souls that are also silent, waiting for an answer. Subscribe, but not just to receive notifications. Sign up to walk with me down this path of shadows, truths, and revelations. You are not alone on this journey. And what comes next goes even deeper. Have you ever had the feeling of being awake, but at the same time, empty? As if you understood everything, and yet nothing made sense? As if all the pieces of the puzzle were there, scattered in front of you, but none of them truly fit together? You look inside, you feel that something has changed, you feel that something has opened up, but instead of the peace you so longed for, what came was a heavy silence. A silence that seems to carry too many questions and too few answers. This is when many people get confused, because spiritual awakening doesn't arrive wrapped in golden light and immediate clarity. It arrives breaking down structures, shattering certainties, emptying. What was once illusion is now visible, but what is true is still hidden. And this journey between a world that has fallen and another that is yet to be born is painful. It confuses the mind, affects the body, and silences the soul. You find yourself more aware, more sensitive, more intuitive, but also more tired. Superficial conversations no longer make sense. Places that once fulfilled you now bore you. The people around you continue to live on autopilot, and you inside silently scream for something more, something you can't name, something that perhaps doesn't even exist in words, just a feeling, a calling. Rumi said that what you are seeking is also seeking you. But what if that something is trying to find you in the silence? What if you are trying to listen with your mind to that which can only be heard by the soul? There is a kind of pain that only those who have awakened know. It is no longer the pain of abandonment, rejection, or common loneliness. It is the pain of seeing clearly, and yet not being able to change everything at once. It is the weight of perceiving the repetitions, the patterns, the cycles, but still being trapped within them. It is feeling the presence of the divine, but continuing to stumble in the shadows of one's own ego. It is being conscious, and yet feeling powerless in the face of inner chaos. This pain is a sign. It shows that you are on the threshold, that you are no longer asleep, but you are not yet fully awake. You are between worlds, and this in-between space is the sacred space where everything begins to reconfigure itself, where old versions of yourself die in silence, so that something new can be born from within. But this birth is slow. It demands patience, it demands surrender, and it demands courage to remain in the dark longer than the ego can bear. Because the ego wants answers, it wants direction, it wants security. But the soul wants silence. The soul wants you to trust even without understanding, to breathe deeply even without knowing what will come, to stop searching outside for what can only be accessed within. Perhaps that's why you still feel lost even after you've awakened, because awakening isn't an end point. It's a break. It's the opening of a new journey, and this journey doesn't give you immediate meaning. It calls you to build meaning step by step, starting with listening, starting with surrender, starting with trust. Have you ever noticed how everything that is true takes time? How healing isn't a snap but a process? How the blossoming of the soul requires that the roots first grow in the dark, away from eyes, away from applause, away from any certainty. And in that darkness, everything seems absent. But in truth, it's preparation. That's why you feel different now. It's not weakness. It's not a mistake. It's the sacred interval between awakening and the embodiment of the new consciousness. It's where your soul is trying to align with something greater. It's where everything within you begins to reorganize itself. And this reorganization hurts, because it undoes the old identity. It disarms control. It empties the easy answers. Do you feel it? The feeling of being here, and yet not being anywhere? Of having progressed so far, and at the same time, seeming to stand still? Of having touched something divine, and still living surrounded by uncertainty? Perhaps this is the moment when we need courage the most. The courage to persevere, the courage to listen, the courage not to run away to distractions, not to rush to the next technique, the next book, the next master, because the true master now is silence. The silence you feel inside, the silence that disturbs you, the silence that reveals you, the silence that comforts you, the silence that heals you, because it is in this silence that your soul reveals itself, not with shouts, not with ready-made phrases, but with subtleties, with sensations, with deep sighs that no one hears, but you feel. And perhaps all you need right now is to trust in this emptiness. Trust that it is not the end, but the fertile space where something sacred is being born. Trust that you are not wrong for feeling what you feel. Trust that the pain that visits you has a message. Trust that the discomfort is part of the journey. Trust that your soul knows where it is leading you. Yes, it can be lonely. It can be confusing. It can be tiring, but it's real. And reality, even when it hurts, is liberating. If you've come this far, perhaps your soul is ready to hear something your mind doesn't yet understand. Perhaps it's time to stop searching for meaning and start feeling, breathing, allowing, listening to what the silence wants to tell you. Now tell me honestly, do you also feel like you're between worlds? Write in the comments, I am between worlds. And may this phrase be your anchor, your seal, and the beginning of a new way of listening. Waking up isn't the end of the pain. It's just the beginning of a more conscious pain, a more subtle, quieter pain, harder to name, Before, when everything was automatic, you suffered, yes. But there was a certain distraction in the chaos, a certain anesthesia in the habit. Now everything is clearer. Every emotion has weight. Every absence echoes louder. Every silence seems to scream. You no longer feel the same as before, but you also don't know where you fit in now. And this feeling of not belonging grows like an invisible space between you and the world. It's as if something has been broken inside. An old layer has fallen away. A veil has been lifted. But what remains is not the lightness you expected. It's a kind of existential nakedness, as if everything that once defined you has disappeared, and now you walk with an identity in transition, no longer who you were, but still unsure of who you are becoming. And in this void between versions, the question that slowly corrodes arises. Why do I still feel lost if I have already awakened? This is where the invisible problem lies. That space between what you've ceased to be and what you don't yet know how to be. An unstable emotional terrain, where the soul no longer tolerates superficiality, but also hasn't yet found firm ground to stand on. You feel, sense, intuit that you are changing, that something inside you will never return to what it was. But this hasn't brought you immediate peace. On the contrary, it has brought more doubts, more silence, more sensitivity. And the world doesn't understand this. The people around you continue chasing the same things, believing in the same promises, repeating the same patterns. And you inside are trying to understand what to do with all this new awareness. And the cruelest part is that this pain has no name. No one taught you it existed, because when they talk about awakening, they usually only show the light, only love, only elevation. But what happens when the light shows you all the wounds you ignored? What happens when love reveals all the ways you learned not to love yourself? What happens when elevation takes you away from everything that was familiar? This pain is real. It's grieving for oneself. It's the soul letting go of its old identity. It's the deconstruction of all the characters you played to survive. It's the crumbling of the life you built based on the expectations of others. It's the pain of realizing that much of what you believed in was actually fear disguised as a dream. And the problem is that since no one sees this pain, you start to wonder if it's real. You start to doubt yourself, to think that maybe you're exaggerating, that maybe you're just tired, that maybe you should move on as everyone says. But something inside you knows. You know there's no going back. You know there's a point of no return. You know that pretending would be a deeper death than any external loss, because once the soul awakens, it no longer accepts being silent. You are not broken, you are being rebuilt. But this rebuilding requires traversing a kind of inner darkness that has no map, no manual, no shortcuts. And that's confusing, because nobody prepares you for this level of sensitivity. Nobody tells you that spiritual awakening comes with a hypersensitivity to human pain, your own and that of others. You start to feel too much, to get emotional about small things, to perceive energies that previously went unnoticed. And this can make you feel fragile, but it's not fragility, it's expansion. The pain now is no longer from lack, it's from awareness. The awareness that there is something greater, truer, deeper, and that it is still distant, or worse, that it is inside you, but still inaccessible. And that is the paradox that tortures. You know there is a source of meaning. You know there is an inner place where everything would make sense, but you can't access it consistently. It's like an old memory. You know it exists, but you can't describe it clearly. You just feel it. And this silent search for meaning is what drives you. Even when you say you're tired, even when you want to give up, even when you distance yourself from everything, deep down there's a spark, a silent certainty, an almost imperceptible intuition that there's something more. And that's why you keep going, even without knowing exactly why, even without seeing immediate results, because your soul knows that something is waiting for you on the other side of this journey. But this something won't come in the way you imagine. It won't come packaged in rational answers. It won't come in a straight line. It will come through listening, through surrender, through the symbolic death of everything that isn't true within you. And this process is solitary, because it's intimate, it's spiritual, it's sacred. It's between you and what dwells within you, between you and the mystery that called to you when everything crumbled. Do you feel like you're at that point? Do you feel that no one around you understands what you're going through? Do you feel that silence is your only true refuge? Do you feel that you no longer fit into the conversations you used to have, the places you used to frequent, the relationships you used to maintain? This is not a mistake. This is the symptom of a profound realignment, the symptom of a soul in the process of conscious reincarnation, no longer a body wandering for survival, but an essence reborn for meaning. You are not alone on this journey, and if these words touched something within you, if this silence I speak of resonates with you, then write in the comments, "I feel the pain of conscience," because only those who are awake enough to feel are able to make it to the end, because their awakening wasn't complete. It was merely an opening, not a surrender. The wound opened, the illusion crumbled, but the soul hasn't yet surrendered entirely. And perhaps that's why the emptiness still lingers, because there's a common misconception, thinking that awakening is the destination, when in reality, it's just the first knock on the door, the beginning, the invitation, the sigh before the storm. It's the moment when something greater calls to us but doesn't yet possess us completely. And in that interval between the call and the surrender, the space of emptiness is born, not as punishment, but as preparation. Rumi reveals, "You are born twice, once from the womb, once from the soul. The second time hurts more, and this second gestation, unlike the first, has no defined time. There is no body to carry you. There is no external world to organize this birth. You are the one who needs to give birth to yourself. You are the one who needs to endure the pain of expansion, the contraction of the ego, the dilation of the spirit. And this spiritual birth happens in the dark, in silence, with pain, with fear, with resistance, but also with faith. Most people, upon experiencing this initial opening, feel a kind of relief, a breath of awareness that breaks through the structures. For a brief moment, everything seems to make sense. There are tears, there are epiphanies, there is an existential euphoria that takes over. But soon after, this initial light begins to fade, and what remains is not peace, but confusion, not elevation, but exhaustion, not clarity, but a profound feeling of being lost. And that's when many wonder, was I wrong? No, you weren't. You simply confused the portal with your destination. This post-awakening emptiness is not a sign of failure. It's a stage in the journey, a necessary space for the soul to begin to reorganize itself. Imagine a glass full of dirty water. When you decide to clean it, the first step is to empty it, to throw everything away. And during this transitional moment, the glass is empty, and this can generate anguish. But it is only in the emptiness that the new can enter. It is only when you let go of everything you thought you were that you can begin to discover who you really are. But this process is frightening, because the ego wasn't made to deal with the unknown. It wants answers, it wants control, it wants predictability. And in this new space, nothing is guaranteed. You don't know who you will be. You don't know what's coming. All you have is silence, and your soul trying to emerge from this formless place. The problem is that we've learned to identify with the noise, to recognize ourselves through the stories we tell, through the roles we play, through what others expect of us. And when all of that begins to crumble, all that remains is the mirror of truth, a mirror that doesn't show what you were, but what you don't yet know how to be. This is the most sacred, and also the most solitary moment of the spiritual journey. It's the moment when you begin to realize that healing won't come from the outside, that no external answer will be enough, that no master can walk for you. It's you, with yourself, alone with your soul, with your pain, with your shadows, with your truth. And this spiritual solitude is not punishment. It is the womb of your rebirth. It is in it that you learn to listen, to trust, to silence the despair of the ego, to endure the absence of meaning without running to distractions. It is in this emptiness that you begin to develop true faith, the kind that doesn't need guarantees, the kind that doesn't rely on promises, but that is born from presence, from silence, from surrender. But this surrender doesn't happen all at once. It's built in layers, in cycles, in lapses of acceptance and resistance, in small daily deaths that gradually empty the false so that the real can find space. And that's what hurts, because the false was also comfortable. The false also had a name, an address, a routine. But the real is wild. The real is unpredictable. The real demands courage. Rumi said that pain is the messenger, and emptiness is the field where that message is planted. If you feel this existential void, if you realize that everything that filled you before no longer serves you, this is a sign that you are being called to give birth to something new, something that will not be given by anyone, something that needs to emerge from within. But the mind tries to resist. It asks, how long will this last? When will peace finally arrive? Why don't I feel complete yet? And these questions, however legitimate they may be, reveal how much we are still trapped in the logic of reward. As if awakening were a business deal. I deconstruct myself, I meditate, I feel, and in return I receive peace. But that's not how the soul works. The soul doesn't negotiate. The soul overflows when the ego surrenders. Therefore, perhaps what you are experiencing now is not absence, but transition. Not failure, but fertile silence. Not emptiness, but sacred space where your new consciousness is trying to sprout. And this sprouting is silent. It happens in the details, in the way you listen to yourself, in the way you breathe in the face of pain, in the way you stop fighting what you feel, because that's where surrender begins. And it is only with surrender that awakening ceases to be a concept and becomes an experience. You don't need to understand everything right now. You don't need to feel ready. You just need to stay, breathe, feel. Don't rush. Don't get distracted, because your soul knows, and it's guiding you, even when it seems like nothing is happening. And at this very moment, perhaps what brings you closest to the truth isn't knowing where to go, but accepting where you are. Now tell me honestly, do you feel like you're giving birth to a new version of yourself? Write in the comments, I am in a state of spiritual gestation, because acknowledging this process is, in itself, an act of surrender. And surrender is where it all begins. The ego has been exposed, but not destroyed. It has been illuminated by awakening, but continues to whisper in the background. It continues to disguise itself as truth, continues to try to organize the chaos with logic, with control, with haste. And perhaps this is one of the most silent and most cruel conflicts of the spiritual journey. The moment when you have already seen the truth, already felt something greater touch you, but are still being pulled back to old patterns. It's as if there are two of you coexisting in the same body, one that has already awakened, another that is still trying to survive. This internal division creates a different kind of weariness, a type of exhaustion that doesn't just come from external circumstances, but from the constant friction between the soul that wants to surrender and the ego that wants to understand, between the part of you that already feels the depth of life and the part that still wants a manual, a formula, a rational explanation that brings security in the face of the unknown. But there is no manual for the sacred, and that's exactly where the silent conflict is born. Because you've already found something, you've already felt something real, you've already touched a frequency that's beyond words. But instead of trusting, you doubt. Instead of surrendering, you analyze. Instead of remaining, you retreat. Not for lack of faith, but for excessive control. The ego has been so trained to seek meaning that now it tries to capture even the mystery. It tries to transform intuition into logic. It tries to translate the invisible with words. And the result is frustration, a profound frustration. Because the more you try to dominate the spiritual with your mind, the more distant everything seems to become. Have you ever experienced this? That feeling of having sensed something profoundly true during meditation, a moment of silence, an intimate moment with life, and then, when trying to explain or understand it, it all disappears, as if the mind, in trying to imprison the sacred, ends up pushing it away. This happens because the soul doesn't fit into the structures of the ego, and every time you try to put the infinite into a formula, it escapes. What remains is absence, emptiness, the uncomfortable silence of someone who has already glimpsed the divine, but is still conditioned to operate on autopilot. And in that place, the ego begins to manufacture doubts. It whispers that perhaps you're making it all up, that perhaps you haven't truly felt anything, that perhaps the awakening wasn't real, or worse, that it wasn't enough, because the ego is addicted to comparison, to results, to certainty, and the soul only wants you to be present, that you stop fighting against what you feel, that you stop trying to turn everything into an explanation. This paradox creates a subtle suffering, a suffering that doesn't scream, but corrodes. A type of pain not caused by something external, but by the constant attempt to interpret spiritually with a structure made only for survival. The ego wasn't created to deal with mystery. It doesn't understand silence. It wants narrative. It wants a beginning, middle, and end. It wants a straight line. And the soul is spiral. Have you ever found yourself trying to accelerate your spiritual process? Trying to force insights? Trying to reach higher states of consciousness as if they were goals? That's the spiritualized ego. A sophisticated character that dresses itself in wisdom but still operates from the same base. Fear. The fear of not being enough. The fear of not being ready. The fear of wasting time. The fear of not achieving. And here arises another aspect of this silent conflict. The seeker who has already found, but doesn't trust what he found. Because what he found didn't come with guarantees. It didn't come with rational explanations. It came as a feeling, as silence, as knowledge that cannot be proven. And so, he hesitates. He questions. He returns to the cycle of searching, because it's more comfortable to seek something you haven't yet seen than to sustain something you've already felt, but can't explain. This is the drama of the expanding spirit. It wants to surrender but still doubts, because the ego wants proof. It wants metrics. It wants absolute certainty. But the soul's path is made of partial surrender, of faith in fragments, of silences that only make sense after you go through them. And the problem is that most cannot remain in this silence long enough. So they return. They return to the old, to the known, to that which is logical, even if it no longer has life. Rumi said that the wound is the place where the light enters. But what he didn't say, and what the soul learns through living, is that this light is often too gentle for the ego to perceive. It doesn't illuminate intensely. It doesn't shout. It doesn't impose. It simply touches, gently, like an old memory, like a whisper. And if you're not sensitive enough, you might think nothing happened. This is where many give up, because they confuse lightness with absence. They confuse silence with emptiness. They confuse confidence with passivity. And they go back to searching. They go back to running. They go back to trying to understand. But the more they try, the further away they feel they are, because they haven't realized that what they seek is already within, that what they seek has already touched their soul, that what they feel is real, but cannot be explained, only lived. If you've made it this far, perhaps you're experiencing exactly this. Perhaps you're at that point in your journey where everything seems suspended, where you've seen too much to turn back, but you're still afraid to move on. And that's okay. This fear is not weakness. It's a sign that you're on the edge between the old and the new, between control and surrender, between doubt and faith, and at this edge all you need to do is keep going. Now, if these words resonate with you, if this silent conflict also lives within you, write in the comments, "I trust what I felt," because this phrase is more than a comment. It's a vow, a silent pact with the part of you that already knows, even if your ego still doubts. What nobody tells you is that true meaning isn't something you seek, it's something you embody. And perhaps that's the most hidden key of all, the simplest, and at the same time, the most difficult to access. Because we've always been conditioned to look outside, to look in books, gurus, philosophies, therapies, practices, techniques, retreats, to look everywhere, except inside, as if meaning were something someone could give us, as if it were out there, waiting to be found, like a hidden treasure at the end of a spiritual map. But it isn't. And however much that frustrates the ego, the soul already knows. True meaning isn't an answer. It's a presence. It doesn't appear when you understand everything. It manifests when you stop running away from yourself, when you allow yourself to feel, deeply, silently, honestly, because while you seek meaning, you are running away from being felt. You are trying to explain what can only be lived. You are trying to organize what was born to be experienced with the whole body, with an open heart, with an exposed soul. This is where many people get lost, because when silence arrives, and it always does, the ego interprets it as emptiness, and emptiness for the ego is a place of threat. It doesn't understand that silence is not absence. It is space. It is fertile ground. It is where the sacred touches the soul. It is where the divine dances with everything you don't yet understand. It is where true meaning begins to embody itself, not as an idea, but as a frequency. But for that to happen, you need to stop running away. Stop filling every silence with explanations. Stop rushing to the next technique, the next reading, the next insight. You need to allow yourself to be with yourself without wanting to change anything. You need to be present with your pain, with your doubt, with your loneliness, with your weariness, and do nothing about it. Just feel, just breathe, just hold on, because it is in this holding that something begins to emerge, something that doesn't come from the mind, something that comes from the soul. And that's the most challenging part, because the soul doesn't shout, it doesn't impose, it doesn't accelerate, it whispers, and to hear that whisper, you need to be so present, so naked, so surrendered, that it almost seems like nothing is happening. But it is, because everything that is real is born slowly. Everything that is true manifests itself in silence. Everything that has deep roots first sprouts within, in the invisible, before appearing outside. Have you ever noticed this? How the biggest changes in your life didn't come from grand external revelations, but from small internal moments of silent clarity. Moments when you didn't understand, but you knew. Moments when nothing changed on the outside, but inside everything was reorganized. That's embodying meaning. That's when the sacred ceases to be a theory and becomes a feeling. And this feeling has no logic. Sometimes it arrives in the midst of pain. Sometimes it appears when you're about to give up. Sometimes it's born from a silence so profound that the ego can't bear it and tries to run away. But if you remain, something happens. Something moves. Something is revealed. Not with words, but with presence. And that presence is the only thing that can truly sustain you. Rumi said, "Don't settle for stories of how things happened to others. Awaken your own legend." And that legend isn't written with ideas. It's written with experience, with skin, with sweat, with tears, with silence. Because there isn't just one path. There's yours. And it won't be revealed by ready-made formulas, but by what only you feel, by what pulsates inside when everything outside crumbles. That's why true meaning isn't sought. It's allowed. Allowed to be born, allowed to flow, allowed to hurt, allowed to manifest in how you live, breathe, love, suffer, listen. It's not a concept to be understood. It's an experience that flows through you. And the more you try to control it, the more it escapes. The more you try to explain it, the more it falls silent. The more you try to reach it with effort, the more distant it seems to be. But when you stop, when you surrender, when you accept that you don't know, that you don't need to know, that maybe you'll never know, at that exact moment, something inside relaxes. And in that relaxation, in that space between one breath and another, between one question and another, something true approaches. Something that doesn't need a name, something that simply is. And that something is everything you've always sought, but hadn't yet stopped long enough to realize. This is the key. And it's not locked. It's available. All the time. But the problem is that the door it opens isn't external. It's internal. And it doesn't open with effort. It opens with presence, with listening, with acceptance. And that requires courage. The courage to be, to feel, to stop searching for meaning, to allow it to find you. And when it finds you, you no longer need to run. You no longer need to prove anything. You no longer need to convince yourself. You simply live, with more gentleness, with more depth, with more truth. Can you feel it now? Do you feel that perhaps what's missing isn't more searching, but more presence? Do you feel it's time to let the silence touch you instead of running from it? Do you feel that perhaps the next step isn't understanding, but allowing? If this feeling has already begun to grow within you, write it in the comments. I allow meaning to find me, because this permission is the first step towards what comes next. And what comes next requires less mind and more soul. Perhaps you've distanced yourself from everything, hoping for peace, but you've only found a new kind of loneliness, a loneliness different from before. It's no longer that pain of abandonment, of being ignored, of not feeling loved. It's an existential loneliness, an inner silence that intensified after awakening. And this silence, however much it carries seeds of healing, weighs heavily at first. At first it feels like punishment. It feels like absence. It feels like something is wrong. You ask yourself, If I'm on the right path, why do I feel this deep emptiness? And it's at this point that many doubt their own journey. It's here that the ego tries to convince you to turn back. But this solitude, however harsh it may be, is a sign that you are drawing closer to your soul. Because when you begin to distance yourself from everything that is not true, space is created. And in that space, the noise ceases, the distractions cease, the emotional addictions cease, and what remains is you, only you, without the roles, without the applause, without the identity that was built to please others. It's you, with a raw soul. Let me tell you a story that might sound familiar. Her name was Clara. She was 34 years old. On the outside, her life seemed well structured. A stable job, superficial relationships that functioned within social norms, and a routine surrounded by distractions that kept her busy enough not to feel what her soul had been trying to scream for years. But then one ordinary day, which for others was just another day, for her, it was a breakdown. Something small, almost irrelevant, triggered what she would later come to understand as an inner calling. She began to question everything. Conversations lost their sparkle. Relationships began to seem artificial. Work began to weigh heavily on her body. And what was once normal became unbearable. Instead of running to more distractions, Clara listened. For the first time, she stopped. She fell silent. And in the silence, she heard the pain of a life built on expectations, the pain of a suffocated soul, the pain of never having truly listened to herself. And then, she did what most people call crazy. She quit her job. She distanced herself from friendships that no longer resonated with her. She stopped pretending on social media. She started saying no firmly. And for a few months, she immersed herself in herself. She read everything she could. She wrote, cried, meditated, walked alone, talked to the sky, and plunged into the sea. And there, between tears and silences, she lived moments of such pure beauty that even she couldn't explain them. But what almost no one sees is that along with those moments of beauty came long nights of loneliness, of doubt, of longing for a life she knew she no longer wanted, but which still offered some kind of familiar comfort. Because the new, however true it may be, is empty at first. It's dark at first. At first it feels like you've lost the world, and you don't know if you'll ever find something to put in its place. Clara lived with this loneliness, and many times she thought about going back. She thought about calling that ex just to feel an echo of familiarity. She thought about accepting that invitation that always ended in an emotional hangover. She thought about reopening her resume and returning to a life that fit on autopilot. But something inside her prevented her, not with words, with silence. A profound silence that said, "Stay." And she stayed, even with fear, even missing everything that was familiar, even being called strange by those who didn't understand her process. She remained, and with time that silence that once seemed like punishment became fertile ground. Tears became prayer, solitude became a temple, and a new version of her began to emerge, not suddenly, but slowly, subtly, like light filtering through cracks, like wisdom born amidst weariness, like faith sprouting without explanation. Clara didn't find ready-made answers. She didn't discover a purpose in pretty words, but something inside her changed. A new sensitivity was born, a new way of listening, a new kind of presence. She began to feel God in the little things. She began to be moved by silences. She began to realize that meaning wasn't something she needed to understand, but something that needed to be lived moment by moment. And today, when she looks back, she knows that initial solitude was necessary. It was like the winter before spring. It was the womb where the new Clara was gestated. It wasn't easy. It wasn't quick, but it was real. And she never again fit into the old version of herself. Perhaps upon hearing this story, you'll see yourself in it. Perhaps not with the same details, but with the same feeling, that of having distanced yourself from everything, hoping for peace, and having found silence, having found longing, having found a kind of emptiness that seems endless. But this emptiness is a passage, it's a bridge, it's preparation, and the more you resist, the more it hurts. But when you accept it, it begins to mold you, to refine you, to teach you what presence is, what surrender is, what truth is. Now tell me honestly, Do you also feel like you're in that space between losing the world and reconnecting with your soul? If so, write in the comments, "I stepped away to rediscover myself." Because this recognition is the first step in honoring the process. And the process is what transforms you. You are not lost. You are being emptied to make room for what truly matters. And perhaps this is the point in the journey that the mind fears most, but the soul desires most. Because what seems like confusion, loss, or stagnation may actually be the most important stage of your spiritual reconstruction. The phase in which everything that wasn't essential begins to crumble, to fade away, to fall silent, so that finally you discover what you carry within. And not only discover it, but allow yourself to live from that point. No longer from stories, no longer from performance, no longer from the struggle for belonging, but from your essence, from your truth. It's hard to see this when the emptying is happening, because it never arrives as a blessing. It doesn't warn you, it doesn't comfort you. It just comes, silences, dries up, takes away. And for a while it feels like you're being punished. It feels like everything is being ripped away. People drift away. Purposes lose their meaning. Old emotions return. The body feels heavy. The soul cries. But if you look deeper, you'll realize it's not punishment. It's cleansing. It's a call to stop filling the sacred with what is superficial. An invitation to stop resisting the fall. Because sometimes it's by falling that you find real ground. Rumi said, "Don't seek love. Seek to remove everything that prevents you from feeling it." And this applies to love, to meaning, to peace, to true silence. What you seek already exists. What you lack is not love. It's the inner space for it to be felt. It's not the light. It's the willingness to let go of the shadow. It's not the answer. It's the surrender that allows for real listening. And surrender is only possible when you let go of control. When you accept that the mind will not guide this part of the journey. That the ego doesn't have the tools for this stretch. That now it is the soul that needs to guide. Even if it doesn't speak. Even if it only breathes within you. Even if it only asks for silence. It is at this point that the shift in consciousness occurs. But not in the grandiose way you expected. It doesn't come with mystical explosions. It doesn't come with proof. It doesn't come with certainties. It comes as an unexpected gentleness, like an inner pause, like a silent decision to no longer fight against what is, like a profound weariness of the character you struggled so hard to maintain. And when you stop, something happens. When you stop trying to be, you begin to be. This shift happens in the body before it happens in the mind. Suddenly you breathe differently. You walk differently. You react differently. You begin to choose more consciously. You begin to feel lighter. You begin to distance yourself from situations that previously held you back. You begin to realize that you no longer need to be accepted by everyone, that you no longer need to have all the answers, that you no longer need to achieve something to feel whole, because you begin to inhabit yourself. And in this dwelling, silence changes its tone. It ceases to be absence and becomes presence. It ceases to be emptiness and becomes space. It ceases to be discomfort and becomes home. You begin to recognize this silence as part of you, an inner space where you can rest, where you can listen, where you can be. And it is in this space that the soul begins to blossom, effortlessly, without demands, without haste. Of course, the mind will still try to return. It will still try to make noise. It will still suggest that something is missing, that you need to run, that you need to prove yourself. But now you already know. You've already experienced another place inside. A place that doesn't depend on the external. A place that doesn't need approval, recognition, or results. A place where you just breathe, just feel, just are. And when you start living from that place, everything changes. Because your choices change. Your relationships change. Your way of being changes. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop repeating and start creating. You stop surviving and start living. Life continues the same on the outside, but inside, it's as if another frequency begins to vibrate, deeper, more stable, more true. It's not that the pain disappears, it's not that the fear never appears again, it's not that the doubts vanish. But now you no longer identify with all of that. You feel, but you don't drown. You observe, but you don't get lost. You embrace, but you don't abandon yourself. Because there's a center within you that is active, a silent center, alive, real, a center that is an anchor, that is home, that is soul. This is the beginning of a new way of living, a life with more presence, with more listening, with more wholeness, not because everything has been resolved, but because you have learned to remain whole even in the midst of not knowing. And that, yes, is a miracle, because that's what changes everything. The way you relate to silence, the way you allow yourself to feel, the way you surrender to what cannot be controlled. If you feel that this shift has already begun to happen within you, even if slowly, even if still shrouded in doubt, write in the comments, "I'm turning inwards," because this turning around isn't an escape. It's a reunion. It's a return to the place you should never have left, your essence. And it's there that true meaning begins to blossom. Awakening is not about understanding. It's about feeling the world from within. It's about being traversed by life in its rawest, most silent, most inexplicable form. And perhaps that's why so many people get confused when they begin to awaken, because we've been taught that spiritual evolution comes with understanding, clarity, and self-mastery. But true awakening doesn't come with control. It comes with surrender. It doesn't arrive with logic. It imposes itself with presence. And presence isn't always comfortable, isn't always illuminated, doesn't always come enveloped in peace. Sometimes it arrives with pain, with confusion, with a profound feeling of no longer knowing anything, and, paradoxically, feeling everything. When you begin to feel the world from within, you realize there's a new way of being. You start to perceive suffering in someone's eyes, without them saying a word. You feel the weight of an energy even when the environment seems calm. You are moved by silences. You cry at the beauty of something small. And that's frightening, because this sensitivity isn't taught as a gift. It's often treated as a weakness. But it's the sign. It's the sign that you're returning to your soul. And the soul doesn't seek explanations. The soul seeks connection. It wants to live life not as an equation to be solved, but as a mystery to be traversed. That's why awakening often comes with discomfort. Not because there's something wrong with you, but because everything that isn't you is being exposed. It's being dissolved. It's being invited to die. This discomfort is the portal. It's what takes you to the other side. It's what distances you from the character, from the defenses, from the repetitions. It's what breaks you. And in breaking you, it shows you what's left when everything crumbles. And what's left is you, without the layers, without the roles, without the masks you used even to protect yourself from yourself. Awakening is this: seeing the world from within, feeling collective pain as if it were your own, feeling the absence of the divine as an unbearable longing, feeling that something is calling, and this call doesn't come from outside. It comes from the center of your chest. It's like an invisible thread pulling you inward, closer, deeper, and with each step on this path, you lose certainties. You detach yourself from truths that once seemed absolute. You realize that life cannot be contained within theories. You recognize that the greatest teachers are not those who speak the most, but those who maintain silence the longest. And in that silence, you begin to see yourself, not as you thought you were, but as you truly are. A living, felt, pulsating presence. A fragment of the divine experiencing the human condition with all its shadows, pains, and possibilities for love. That's when everything starts to change, because you stop looking for meaning in external answers and begin to find meaning in the simple fact of being present, of feeling, of breathing, of looking someone in the eyes and realizing that there, in that instant, something is being revealed. There are no words that can account for this kind of revelation. It cannot be explained. It is lived. It becomes a part of you. Have you ever found yourself experiencing something seemingly ordinary but being overcome by an emotion you can't explain? A sunset, a hug, a song, a silence that took you inward. That's feeling the world from within. It's realizing that the divine isn't out there, distant on top of some spiritual mountain. It's here, now, in the detail, in the instant, in the pause between one thought and another. And this kind of perception is only possible when you go through the discomfort without trying to leave it prematurely. When you stop fighting what you feel and start listening to what it wants to tell you. Discomfort is not your enemy. It is the map. It points to what is trying to emerge, to what is asking for space, to what is waiting for you to stop resisting. When you begin to accept this, you realize that everything that hurts you has something to teach you, that every emptiness carries within it a seed of revelation, that every anguish is also an invitation to truth, and that the deeper you allow yourself to go, the closer to the divine you realize you are, because the divine does not live outside of pain. It lives within it. It dwells in the center of your vulnerability. It reveals itself when you have nowhere else to hide. You are closer to the divine than you imagine. Perhaps you just haven't recognized it yet because you're waiting for it to arrive with lights, with certainties, with guarantees. But what if it's already there, in the silence that visits you every night, in the sigh that comes when you let go, in the tear that falls when you stop resisting? What if the divine is exactly that, the instant when you surrender to the truth you feel, even without understanding it? This is the silent revolution. The moment you stop trying to understand awakening and begin to live from it, without explanations, without performances, without seeking to be spiritual, simply being what you feel, simply becoming a living presence, simply embodying the divine in gesture, in breath, in listening, in touch, in the ordinary existence that now carries a new flavor, a new frequency. If you feel like you're at that point, feeling the world from the inside even when it still seems difficult to explain what's happening to you, write in the comments, "I feel life from within." Because this phrase isn't just a comment, it's a milestone. It's an acknowledgement that something has already begun, and that something is about to expand. Perhaps now you understand, emptiness is not punishment. It is a portal, a silent, subtle portal that doesn't open with force, but with presence. A threshold that doesn't demand conquests, but surrender. And you arrived here not because you overcame something, but because you grew tired of running away. Because you began to feel that it's no longer possible to continue numbing yourself, because you realized that the silence you avoided so much is exactly where your soul dwells. And when that happens, everything changes. Absence takes shape. Discomfort transforms into direction. Loneliness ceases to be an abyss and becomes a temple. Perhaps you're still in that confusing space between what has fallen and what is yet to be born. Perhaps you're looking inside yourself and don't know exactly what you see. Perhaps you're still questioning whether everything you feel is real or just another phase. But the soul knows, and what the soul recognizes, it never forgets. You can even try to return to the old world, to the old habits, to the old roles, but something in you no longer fits. You no longer accept what you once accepted. You can no longer pretend you don't feel, because feeling has become inevitable. And this feeling, however painful, is the gateway to true healing. Emptiness, that great misunderstanding, is not a sign of spiritual failure. It is a sign of the soul's maturity. It shows that you are shedding the layers of the persona, the constructed identity, the version you learned to wear to survive. Emptiness arrives when these layers fall away, and for a moment, you find yourself naked before your own essence, without reference, without structure, without guarantees, but with something far more valuable: space. Space for the real to manifest. Space for the divine to find a dwelling place. Space for the new you to reveal yourself, not through effort, but through permission. That's why silence becomes so important at this point in the journey. Because it's not the absence of an answer. It is the answer. It is the language of the soul, the language of the sacred. What we often interpret as solitude is, in fact, the first time we are whole with ourselves, without distraction, without escape, without noise. And that's exactly where the miracle happens. Not as a spectacular event, but as an internal shift in perception. You begin to see life with different eyes. You begin to feel things in a deeper, more present, more truthful way. The outside world may not change immediately, but inside, you are no longer the same. And that's enough. Because true spiritual transformation doesn't happen in big external upheavals, but in small internal deaths, in the moments when you choose to feel instead of run away, to listen instead of reacting, to stay instead of running. And each time you choose this, an old part of you dissolves, and a new part, more aligned with your essence, begins to be born. Have you ever felt this? That moment when, even without answers, even without guarantees, you find yourself more present, more connected, more whole. Even with pain, even with fear, even with doubt, there is a part of you that is at peace. A peace that doesn't come from the mind. A peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. A peace that is born from accepting everything as it is. That is born from the silence you have come to respect. And it is this silence that now guides you, not as an external master, but as an inner force that knows the way. No matter how much your ego tries to convince you that something is missing, no matter how many times your mind insists on searching outside, if you've come this far, it's because something inside you already knows, already recognized, already felt. And once you feel it, there's no going back. There's no unseeing it. There's no pretending it doesn't hurt, that it doesn't call out, that it doesn't throb. So breathe, allow it, be silent, and surrender. Because this portal you are crossing, the one that seems like the end, is in fact the beginning. And you don't need to do anything other than remain present, feel, listen, and trust. Trust that even if everything is dark, even if nothing makes sense now, there is something greater sustaining the process. There is a wisdom that you may not yet understand, but that guides you. And this guidance, however invisible it may be, is real. It is alive. It is love. You don't need to understand everything, you just need to be fully present where you are. Because that's exactly where the soul begins to blossom. It is in silence that it expresses itself. It is in emptiness that it reveals itself. And it is in surrender that it unites with the divine that has always been within you. Not above, not outside, but right there, where everything begins, where everything ends, where everything is. If something inside you felt this calling, even if in the form of silence, write it in the comments. I accept silence as the answer from my soul. Let this be your gesture of surrender, your mark of presence, your acknowledgement that you are not lost, you are becoming whole. If this touched your soul, continue this journey with me. If you've made it this far, it wasn't by chance. Your soul is responding, even if silently. This path doesn't end now. It has only just begun. And if something within you has been touched, even gently, subscribe to the channel. Because the next key is in the next video, and I want to guide you through every step of this spiritual journey. And yes, if this video spoke to you on any level, please leave a like. This isn't just a gesture for the algorithm. It's a silent vote. It's like saying, I want more of this. More truth, more silence, more soul. Now take a deep breath and continue. The next video is already on the screen waiting for you, and it might be exactly what your soul needs to hear right now.